the end of World War II, the world witnessed a showdown between the two biggest bullies on the block. It was like watching a sibling rivalry, except instead of fighting over the TV remote, they were fighting over continents. So let's take a peek at this geopolitical soap opera known as the Cold War. After the World War II, the major European powers were tired of the war that just recently ended. America and the Soviet Union emerged as the new power in the world. But they were not very nice. The Soviet Union was known for its vast territory and was like exerted authority with a firm hand. Meanwhile, America was showing off its nuclear arsenal, which it had already tested on Japan. And then the party started. Europe became a focal point of this rivalry, with the Western Bloc led by the US and the Eastern Bloc led by the Soviet Union. And they engaged in a standoff characterized by political, economic, and military tensions. Berlin, in particular, became a symbol of this division, with the city physically divided between East and West. And then they have begun to move towards war. Not a direct traditional war of destruction, but a war of tension and desire for superiority and control. In America, for example, government employees who express any communist ideas or affiliations will be expelled. On the other hand, the Soviet Union suppressed all forms of resistance or rebellion against it. The challenge between the two superpowers has taken the form of competition in many fields, such as science, industry, space, sports, and armaments. The Soviet Union invested a lot in industry, armaments, and it succeeded in developing nuclear weapons for the first time in the year 1949. And in the same year, America founded NATO, or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which is a collective defense organization among the countries of the Western Bloc. Throughout the Cold War, indirect confrontations and conflicts occurred between America and the Soviet Union and its allies. Greece witnessed one of the conflicts of the Cold War as civil war broke out between the rebel communist militia supported by the Soviet Union and the Royalist Party that held power supported by Britain and then by America. And after some tensions between the Soviet Union and Yugoslavia, the alliance between them fell and the Greek communists lost support and were forced to surrender, and Greece became part of the Western Bloc. Far away, after 3 years of civil war in China, the communists prevailed against the nationalists who fled to Taiwan. The Soviet Union gained China as an important ally in the region and played a role in two important wars in Asia. The first one is the Korean War, which began with an attack by communist North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and China, and South Korea, supported by an international force under the banner of the United Nations and under American leadership. After 3 years of war, there was a ceasefire and the Korean Peninsula was divided into two countries, North Korea and South Korea. The second war China intervened in was the Indochina War, which lasted 46 years. As it supported a communist resistance militia led by Ho Chi Minh against French colonialism supported by America, France was forced to leave the region, and the state of Vietnam was divided into two parts, with the communists in the north and the American-backed nationalists in the south. And this was the beginning of the Vietnam War, which we will talk about in a minute. And in response to America's establishment of NATO, the Soviet Union established the Warsaw Pact, a military organization that brought together the Soviet Union with the rest of its allies from the Eastern Bloc. The Soviet Union began preparing itself with hundreds of long-range missiles that could reach Western Europe. And that was in response to American missiles that were located in Europe. In China, after some disagreements caused by differences in communist ideology and differences over lands, Communist China, led by Mao Zedong, broke its alliance with the Soviet Union and attempted to begin to become a new global power. In the 60s, the Soviet Union tried to isolate West Berlin once again by building the Berlin Wall, which was aimed at preventing immigration from East Berlin, where conditions were much more difficult. In light of the conflicts between America and the Soviet Union, many countries in the world decided to remain neutral with regard to the two powers and establish the non-aligned movement. America succeeded in influencing Latin American countries. In Cuba, America, it trained Cuban rebel forces to invade the Bay of Pigs and overthrow the new communist regime, but the attempt was a complete failure. The Soviet Union took advantage of the Americans' failure in Cuba to gain diplomatic rapprochement with it and built secret bases for nuclear missiles located a very short distance from American soil. This was a reaction to the presence of American nuclear missiles close to the Soviet Union in Turkey. In Vietnam, due to fear of communist control coming from the North, America and some other countries decided to support the South by sending 500,000 soldiers to participate in the Vietnam War. And this war lasted for a while, and millions of people died in it. The decision upset France, which was hoping to find a more peaceful solution. And in 1960, France decided to withdraw its forces from NATO forces to express its desire to form a more independent opinion and position from America. And in 1975, the communists won in North Vietnam, and Vietnam united to form a socialist republic. This was a defeat to America, whose image was greatly diminished in the world. The Soviet Union exploited the decline of America's image to revive and strengthen its influence in the world. And in 1979, the Soviet Union sent troops to Afghanistan to support the Afghan communist government against the so-called attack, a religion supported by America and some other countries. The Soviet war in Afghanistan lasted 10 years and ended with the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan, and a civil war broke out between the Afghan army and the Mujahideen, some of whom later became members of the Taliban movement. Otherwise, the Soviet Union upgraded its missiles aimed at Western Europe with new, more advanced, and accurate missiles, which raised concerns in the Western Bloc and caused America to begin building new missile bases in Europe. As in West Germany, the arms race was very strong between the two superpowers, and the Soviet Union invested up to approximately 14% of its national income in armaments. In the 80s, the Soviet Union began to become economically exhausted and could no longer continue to pay large sums of money to pursue the arms race or support communist governments in various countries. So America and the Soviet Union began negotiations with the aim of disarmament. And for the first time, Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev quickly launched restructuring policies aimed at economic reforms. For example, the economic reform in the Soviet Union involved reducing state control over agriculture and the economy, and reducing restrictions on civil institutions and allowing greater openness to the West. For all these reasons, the people of the Soviet Union countries began to demand independence one after another. And in 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall signaled the disintegration of Soviet influence. And by 1991, the former Soviet republics had gained their independence. And with the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the Cold War officially ended.